At what level is it good to be the king? Let's find out by looking at the Dungeons and Dragons Master Set. Tonight on the Old Dragoon. Welcome back to the Old Dragoon. You might have noticed that we kind of took a week off and wonder what's up with that. Well, I am sitting in the game room that we refer to as the One-Eyed Ogre. The ogre has mostly had its books packed in storage because of a massive water leak that we had under the slab that required us to rip out some walls and redo a bathroom, and mission creep led to another. Anyway, we finally got the books and box sets back in the ogre, and I have been spending a lot of time trying to get this room back into shape. Also, my wife goes in for knee surgery in a couple of days, so we've been preparing for that. But we are back on schedule now, dropping tonight's video about the master set. So, we've looked at the basic set, which covers levels 1 to 3. And then we looked at the expert set, which covers levels 4 to 14. And then the companion set that covers 15 to 25. Tonight, we're taking a look at the master set. And I've got to say, I have mixed feelings about this box set. When the box set came out, we thought it was pretty freaking awesome. And as you can see, the cover art is pretty cool with a warrior wearing a crown. This must be the king, and he's riding a gold dragon and wielding, it's probably a magic sword. I mean, it's pretty cool. But how do you work that into your D&D campaign, and what does the master set add that you did not have before with basic, expert, and companion? The answer goes back to one of the lines in Tolkien, lots and none at all. So let's take a look. So, the Master Player's Book. We jump in and find out that this came out in spring of '85, just a little bit before I started playing D&D myself. So this book is a 32-page saddle-stapled book, like many of the other books in this line. It's going to have a cardstock cover, black and white interior. So we jump straight in to the character classes. The description of what a master's game is going to be like talks about siege warfare and castles and the sorts of things you're doing once you're high enough level that delving another dungeon is pretty passé. So how does it actually work? So taking a look at the cleric, and here's what I mean by lots and none at all. For a moment, we're going to jump back to the D&D companion set for just a second. So this is the cleric in the companion set, levels 15 to 25. As you can see, the cleric picks up 7th level spells at level 17. And as the cleric progresses, gains more and more spells of that level and of all the levels below it. We also find out that the cleric has a chance of turning special undead starting at level 15 and can automatically turn them at level 25. So jumping back to the master set, what we get is kind of more of the same. The cleric can already turn special undead and never gains the ability to destroy them. Now, lesser undead, of course, ramp up from destroy to destroy plus or destroy hashtag, destroy pound for those of us that are a little bit older than that. So the cleric does gain the ability to destroy more lower level undead, but their ability against the upper level undead stays pretty consistent. And if you take a look at the spells, you don't really gain access to anything more powerful than the 7th level spells you've already got. You simply get to cast more of them per day. Now, to be clear, spells of the 5th, 6th, and 7th level can become hideously powerful. So You are gaining power, that's true, but you're not getting any abilities you didn't have before, unless you count the new spells that are presented in this volume. The survival spell. This would be the spell that would be cool for taking your character, say, underwater. Or maybe you want to riff on Spelljammer and take your characters into space, or go to the elemental plane of fire. The survival spell will allow you to do that. It is basically the ultimate protection against environmental harm. So that gives you some opportunities to do things that you may not have been able to do before. The travel spell allows the cleric and a number of their companions to travel ridiculously fast, like moving between planes, or flight, or going to gaseous form. Well, okay. The cleric can only do that to themselves. They can't take people along at that point. But this spell does allow you to go places and do things you couldn't do before. But it is a 7th level spell, so if you own the book, this does come available potentially at a much lower level. So the wish spell makes its appearance, and that is certainly a game changer. And then the wizardry spell, which I think is kind of cool because it allows a cleric to cast arcane magic, but it only allows 1st or 2nd level spells and takes a 7th level spell to do it. Not sure that's exactly the trade-off you're looking for. We get a list of new druidic spells. Now remember, in this version of D&D, you have to reach 9th level as a cleric before you can then change classes and become a druid. Here's some additional druid spells. Detect Danger is an interesting one because we've had Detect Magic. We've had No Alignment, things like that. But Detect Danger is pretty wide open and could be used for lots of things. The good old Heat Metal spell makes an appearance. I remember using this one in 2nd edition AD&D. I honestly don't remember using it in the BECMI series, but here it is. Allows you to heat metal, and if someone is holding the metal, or worse, wearing the metal, they'll take quite a bit of damage unless they can get it off of them as it heats up and then cools down, still doing damage as it cools. Pro Poison, Summon Animals, Dissolve, Turn Wood. Now that one is really interesting because you can use Turn Wood to defend yourself from, say, incoming arrows or ballista bolts, or move an entire ship. Turn Wood could be really, really useful if used correctly. Summon Elemental pops up at 7th level. That one, always a blast. And then we get to Fighter. Fighter has 1 of 3 columns, and all the Fighter really gets is +2 hit points per level and some better saving throws. The Fighter does get the special abilities listed in the companion, including the multiple attacks option if the 2-hit number on a creature becomes adjusted to 2 or less. But that's it. Fighters really don't gain all that much more unless you use the optional weapon mastery rules, which we'll look at in a moment. Magic users, kind of like clerics. If you take a look, the magic user walks in to the master set already having access to 9th level spells, which is the most powerful type of magic a magic user can cast in BECMI Dungeons and Dragons. So the mage, again, is getting more of the same. And as I said with the cleric, yes, casting more spells of the uppermost levels adds a ridiculous amount of power, but it does not allow you to do anything you couldn't already do. So there are some new spells added. The clone spell, the ability to create magical monsters, force field. The wizard has a version of the cleric's travel spell, so can also plane hop and fly and go gaseous. Contingency is always fun. You set up another spell to go off on a contingent situation. so that you can, hey, here's the example. When I'm touched or struck by any living creature that is not lawful or neutral, cleric, except for my friends Charlie McGonagall and Sally Silvernose. I actually went to school with Charlie McGonagall. Then charm monster on the creature touching or striking me. So it's an if-then statement, and you can use it to cast other spells. That's kind of cool. Heal is an odd one. It allows magic users to heal all but 1 to 6 hit points on a creature and remove curses, stop poisons, cure diseases, blindness. That's pretty cool. It's a great spell, but again, as long as you own this book with the spells in it, you potentially have access to it as soon as you can cast 9th level spells. Now, it's a little different for wizards. You actually have to find the spell on a scroll or in some dusty scroll book or spell book somewhere. It's not like you can just pray for it because the spell exists. So, again, new spells, but not an actual level of power higher than the previous setup. Note that Time Stop and Wish are available. Those are both extremely effective spells. Then we get to Thieves. The Thieves at least get all of their thief skills creeping upward, but because BECMI goes to 36th level, they kind of had to dole out the increases in the skills bit by bit over those 36 levels. If you go back and take a look at the original Expert set, the Expert Thief got skills at a little bit faster rate than the BECMI Expert Thief. And that was done to facilitate giving more points over more levels to the BECMI Thief. So, taking a look at these charts, you see saving throws do improve as they do with all characters, and the thief skills slowly creep upward. Interestingly, Hide in Shadows doesn't reach a possibility of 100% until you max out at 36 level. So even at 26 level, there's a 20% chance your Hide in Shadows doesn't work. So thieves do kind of get the short end of the stick in BECMI D&D in a lot of cases. There are some house rules that I use to make thieves a little bit more survivable at low levels, but maybe we'll talk about that in a future video. So Dwarf, Elf, and Halfling, remember, they topped out at 12th level for Dwarf, 10th level for Elf, and 8th level for Halfling. So what do they get? As they level up, they continue to improve their fighting ability through something called attack ranks. At the bottom of this page, you see the attack rank chart. Now, what this effectively does is let the Demi-human continue to level up as a fighter without the benefit of hit points or further improvements in saving throws. And while their saving throws, as they approach their maximum levels, are pretty incredible, you see that the human saving throws for most of the classes get even better once they are in the high 20s to the low to mid 30s where they top out. So eventually the humans will sort of overshadow the demi-humans, but they do get to continue advancing, at least in their fighting capability. So they do pick up some of the fighter abilities from the companion set as they hit particular experience point totals. So that's good. But the elf is going to be completely overshadowed as a spellcaster by a human mage that just keeps leveling up. The elf never gets access to anything more than 5th level spells. So I kind of struggle with this. I like that the master set is here. I like the information that's located within this set. But only once in my D&D career have we ever taken characters into the levels covered by this set, and that was when we were very, very new at D&D and playing like every afternoon during the summer in middle school because we had no money and nothing better to do. I won't say it was completely Monty Hall, but by the end of the summer, we were in the upper 20s in levels and doing some pretty epic stuff. Things that I kind of shudder at today we actually subdued a dragon using the rules. Strike with the flat of the blade. You're not doing any real damage, but as soon as you hit the dragon's hit point total, they surrender. And our DM Daniel immediately regretted letting us subdue that dragon, and killed off my magic user with the dragon in a particularly middle school way. We were attempting to put a feed bag on the dragon because, hey, we're like 12. What do we know? And Daniel had the dragon accidentally belch acid and kill my wizard. Daniel had a house rule that acid damage could not be magically healed, and so that was it. That was it for my magic user. Again, it was a middle school game, sue me. But that's the only time we've ever gotten up into these levels. In other campaigns, we have just never played this high. So, again, I'm a little torn on this set. Cool stuff in here, but I really haven't used it since the 1980s, and I'm not sure what I'd do with it if I got that high in a campaign. Now, saying that, it makes me really want to start a BECMI campaign, go this high, and then have the characters ascend to immortality. That's something I've never done. I own the Immortals set, I've read the Immortals set, and I have Wrath of the Immortals. But not entirely sure I could keep a campaign running that long. Not in adult mode. Back in middle school and high school, we could do it. All right, so let's keep going. Some great Jeff Easley artwork. So here's the hit roll charts. You will see that just like with AD&D, 20 repeats on the hit roll chart. So a 20 will hit anything in that range, a natural unmodified 20. And with modifiers, you can hit things that require more than a 20. So they introduce some new armor, the suit armor. This will be familiar to anyone who has the Rules Cyclopedia. Suit armor is like full gothic jousting plate, like the kind of armor that you generally see standing in the corner of a dusty old mansion. Not only does it give you AC 0, it also subtracts 1 point of damage per die of incoming damage. And if it's a magical suit, it might subtract more than that. However, it's loud, it clanks a lot, it will give you away, and you're still vulnerable to magic and gaze attacks and things like that. So, suit armor, it's pretty cool, but it does have its downsides. Now we get into something that I found to be a little controversial, and that's weapon mastery. Now, at North Texas RPG Con, I got the unique opportunity. Well, it's not that unique. They used to come to the con every year. But I got the opportunity to actually play D&D with Frank Menser. And, of course, everyone at the table regaled Frank with questions about BECMI and about what it was like to work on D&D and, be a TSR employee and all that. And one of the things that came up was weapon mastery. And it came out that these weapon mastery rules were not really play tested before they went into this book. So that explains a little bit of the wonkiness that can happen when you use the weapon mastery rules. On the other hand, they can be ridiculously fun. So weapon mastery is a little bit like specialization and double secret specialization from AD&D, but it's handled a little differently. Different characters start the game with a couple of proficiency slots, and I found it interesting because I was used to using these rules from the Rules Cyclopedia. It wasn't until I was reading the book to prepare for this video that I noticed the little note at the bottom of page 15 saying, hey, you might allow fighters to start with 3 or 4 weapons instead of 2. I thought that was just standard if you were using weapon mastery. I had no idea that was optional as presented in the original form. Of course, I'm going to give fighters additional weapon mastery slots. Why? Because they're kind of bereft of the cool stuff later levels. Clerics and mages continue to get spells upon spells, and All sorts of other things happen, but the fighter just gets to swing the sword a lot. And so it can feel a little boring. So weapon mastery options can give a fighter something to set them apart. Note that this is the exact same argument that caused feats to become a thing in Dungeons and Dragons starting with 3.0, because you had the linear fighter and the quadratic wizard. So even as early as BECMI D&D, there's some things going on to try to address that disparity. So weapon mastery, we're not going to go into a full account of what it does because there are so many special effects. So many. But basically, the normal attack roll doing the normal amount of damage is what you would have if you were basically trained in a weapon. And when you're using weapon mastery, there are limitations on how many weapons you're actually trained with, and everything else is considered untrained. Now, once you become trained, you do the basic amount of damage with the weapon that you're used to. Once you move up above that to skilled, expert, master, there is a chart showing how much damage you do at that skill level, and additional effects may apply. Monsters can learn these things too, but they're limited by their intelligence. And training can take time and money. And if you fail the training roll, you simply don't get any better. You have to spend the money and the time all over again. You earn additional slots to either learn new weapons or attempt to improve a weapon you already know at various levels. Actually, let's jump back to page 15 and see that additional weapons show up at 3, 6, 9, 11, 15, 23, 30, and 36. And then every 200 XP after that, you can get an additional one. Note that I forgot to mention demi-humans. Demi-humans can actually continue picking up weapon mastery after they've reached maximum level. And I believe there is an optional rule in here, and I cannot remember exactly what page it's on, that you might allow demi-humans to have basic skill at all weapons. There it is. Demi-humans start with basic skill in all weapons not forbidden to them. So demi-humans do get a leg up in that way. So what can you actually do with this stuff? Well, you get 2 hit roll bonuses. And as you go up in skill, you will also gain a secondary attack with the weapons that you are a master or a grandmaster in. So aside from the normal rules for multiple attacks, you can also get multiple attacks by becoming a master or grandmaster with a given weapon. Now, you can also get extra attacks for holding a shield weapon, a shield with blades on it or spikes on it that you can then make an attack with the shield. So it is possible to try to talk your DM into letting you have a ridiculous number of attacks by becoming a master with a weapon and then carrying a shield, and then if you're attacking really, really easy to hit creatures, you could argue for extra attacks there. And we did. Of course we did. We were in middle school. Yeah, we didn't even touch these weapon mastery rules in middle school, but we did argue a lot for the extra attacks when you needed a 2 on the hit roll. So you get special effects in addition to the bonuses to hit and the increasing damage. You can have a despair effect when you roll maximum damage, causing creatures to check morale, which is kind of cool. And the more skilled you are, the larger number of hit dice of creatures you can affect. There are knockout effects. There are effects allowing you to throw a weapon that isn't normally thrown. There are effects for entangling. So, as you can see, this chart gets a little crazy. And there's all kinds of icons that you have to look up. Like two-handed weapons, or weapons you can use a shield with, or weapons that can only be used when charging. So you look all of these things up, you take a look at the various levels of mastery, and you see the different effects that are possible. You can also learn how to parry with some of these weapons that give you armor class bonuses against one or more incoming attacks. It gets a little complex, but it's also a lot of fun. It will create some balance issues if you're not careful. So I highly recommend, having done this with my Rule Cyclopedia games, if you're going to allow weapon mastery, make sure you allow weapon using creatures to also use weapon mastery. Otherwise, your fighting characters will get a little bit out of hand. So, let's move along. Here talks about some more of the special effects, like weapon breakage and causing paralysis, strangulation. You can garrote someone with these rules. And some of these weapons, like the blowgun with its poison, can actually do a percentage of a target's hit points rather than just a straight damage roll. So that could be devastating if you hit someone just right. So we got rules on settling down in the companion set. Sorry. It's been a long day. And we've talked about, fighters can build castles and wizards can build towers and thieves can start a thieves guild. We also got the rules for mass combat in the War Machine. This book adds the siege machine, which allows you to conduct sieges, and you get information on siege weapons. The master set is really steering you towards epic stories that cover a lot more than, as we said earlier, dungeon delving. You're actually going to be ruling things. You're going to be carving out your own corner of the D&D game world to exert your influence over. And so rather than you and your friends marching into danger, you're leading armies at this point, which requires you to hire the armies and buy siege weapons to go besiege an enemy castle, or perhaps to defend your own castle from being besieged. Whoops. So there are rules for different siege weapons. There's some illustrations of siege weapons. You get rules for creatures attacking fortifications, which are pretty interesting. Like an ogre or a giant pounding on your castle walls. You take a look at how much it costs to hire siege specialists. Here's the stats for the siege weapons and the stats and costs for fortification pieces. And then the expansions to the War Machine rules to conduct sieges. You also have an interesting table, the ability of a cleric to sustain your people by using their clerical spells. Create food and water, create food. So that changes how a historical siege worked. Usually you tried to starve out your opponent, but if they've got enough levels worth of cleric inside their walls, that's just not going to work. So it does rather change the way the D&D world works compared to our own world. So that's the end of the player book. Let's take a look at the DM book and see what it adds. So we get a map of the known world. Mystara, or the known world, is my favorite campaign setting of all time, hands down, especially when you add Hollow World. You've got more than enough to adventure for the rest of your days. And the neat part is the parts of the known world that are detailed in the Gazetteer series specifically, and later in the Champions of Mystara box set and the Hollow World box set, There are so many different environments, sort of genres. Like you can go from Eastern European in the Duchy of Keramakos to almost Renaissance Italy in the Republic of Darakan, and then you head east and you end up in Arabian Nights in the Emirates of Yalarum, and then you travel north and end up in sort of a Norse Viking-esque setting that actually has immortals going by, you know, the names like Loki and Thor. So all of that is just within a few short days or weeks travel by horseback. So it gives the DM the ability to really shift the tone of the game when something becomes old hat. So the known world is a very interesting place to adventure. Moving into the master's book, you can see from the table of contents that some of the things in here are just explanations of topics that are probably going to come up far more often with high level characters, like anti magic effects, dispel magic, how do you get income and experience points from your domain. There's also an optional class in here that we'll take a look at, and some new monsters. And the monsters also talk about planar travel, because now with access to the travel spell, you have convenient planar travel. Now you don't have to find some sort of a magic item or portal. Your cleric and magic user can just make it happen. We also talk about artifacts. Magic items so powerful they're in a class of their own. So, anti-magic is explained here, exactly how it works, what it applies to, and what it doesn't apply to. So we have some rules here for creating characters that start out at high levels. There's some more rules for the effects of your charisma on the morale of your troops. AD&D kind of had this worked in from the beginning. You're allowed to pick up some magic items if you create a character directly to high level, which is kind of cool, actually. Especially if you want to dip your toe into master level play without playing for months to years on end to get a character up that high. So you can also have standing troops, obviously. There's notes on retiring a character. But with the possibility of actually ascending to immortality, would you really retire? Anyway, rules on how dispel magic works, and on what you can do to specific magic items with a dispel. Here's the things about Dominion income and experience points. Changes in how encounters work at this level of play. And something that we're used to in AD&D, but makes an appearance here, adjusting the hit points of a creature based on if they're smaller or larger. We've done that with dragons a lot, but here's the rules for doing it to pretty much any other creature. So we have more information on how things that were part of the game since the beginning, like wandering monsters and reactions, change at master level. There's some notes on how to balance encounters. This is a really early CL rules. I don't remember these rules myself either. Again, we didn't play in the Masters rules a lot. So I found it interesting to go back over this. And, it actually looks like it would work almost as well as some of the encounter level mechanics we've gotten since 2000. So they revamped the experience chart, especially for upper level creatures. They explain how you use the 2-hit charts if the numbers are off the chart in either direction. And then talks about the immortals. The spheres of power are kind of the different ways the immortals are classified: the matter sphere, the energy sphere, the time sphere, the thought sphere, the entropy sphere, and how your character becomes an immortal and what the immortals do in the day. Now, there's deeper rules on this, obviously, in the immortals set, but when your characters are moving at levels 26 to 36, you're much more likely to run afoul of immortals or to be approached by immortals to do their handiwork for them. And so this set really spells out exactly how the immortals interact on the physical plane and what an avatar of an immortal can work like. So, more rules on immortals, the paths to immortality. These are really interesting because there's different ways to become immortal. The dynast basically founds a dynasty, founds an enduring, long-lasting legacy kingdom. The epic hero has to basically go on the sort of quests that we read about in ancient mythology. The paragon becomes the absolute ideal of a particular class and then goes back and learns another class and then learns another class. So the paragon learns how to do many things and then earns immortality that way. Actually, I believe I just confused the paragon with the polymath. My apologies. Again, it's been a long day. The polymath is the one that rises to multiple levels in multiple classes to earn immortality. The paragon has to create an entirely new magic item. That's right. So you have to research spells. You have to create an item that didn't previously exist. And that's your key to immortality. My apologies. There's a section on intelligence of creatures because now we have some rules that are linked to the intelligence of creatures. So we need to know what the intelligence of the creatures are. This is pretty cool because if you go back to Holmes D&D, remember that Holmes did initiative by dexterity. However, you didn't have a list of what the dexterity of average creatures was. You were instructed to just roll 3d6 on the spot and determine the dexterity of the monsters. Here, you're getting a view of what the average monster intelligence is, and then you can modify it using the individual creature table. So you can have, say, interfaced with the weapon mastery rules, a particularly skillful orc. And then we talk about mystics. Mystics are presented here as an NPC, but the DM can allow them to be a PC. What is the mystic? It is the BECMI D&D monk, and I love them. I absolutely love them. They're presented in the Rules Cyclopedia, where I became much more familiar with them, but here they are in the Master's Book. They get the ability to strike with their hands as if their hands are first silver and then magic weapons. So they can do martial arts attacks and hit creatures that are normally only struck by magic weapons. They gain additional damage with their bare hand attacks. They gain armor class. They have some special abilities that are very similar to the monk abilities in AD&D. They're pretty interesting. They're a lot they're a lot more laid out as a normal character class in the rules cyclopedia, but there's enough here for you to play a mystic or to include mystics as NPCs. So then we start getting into plane hopping, reality shifting. Let's see. Oh, the plane hopping is after this section. So rules on Wokan and Shaman, basically non-human spellcasters, so that you can add spellcasters to your encounters. Rules for Master Undead. And then here are some new monster entries organized by the planes, because now again you have access to planar travel. So prime material plane is up first. Dinosaurs and dragons. Here's a list of mystics as NPCs, and you can see the amount of damage they can do with their barehanded attacks, and that they get multiple attacks much sooner than the fighter does. This is an interesting monster that I wanted to call your attention to, the mech. Huge metallic creations created by a long dead race of inhuman sorcerers. Basically mecha. Huge automated robots. You could also equate them to Warforged, just really big ones. There's lots of heavy hitters, as you would expect in the master set. So then we jump to the other planes. I remember black balls being something that our DM Daniel would throw at us in the upper level games, and being scared to death of them. The Phoenix. Here's a listing of other monsters and where to find the full description of them. And then we discuss artifacts. Artifacts, as you recall, appeared in the DMG for AD&D First Edition, and in Second Edition there was an entire book of artifacts. Artifacts are super powerful magic items. According to this book, they're treated as if they are 40th level. There are rules for how to destroy artifacts, because that's probably going to come up as a quest at this level of play. Sort of like taking the ring and dropping it into Mount Doom. There are rules for the creation of artifacts, and a list of powers that you can put into them. Sort of build your own artifact subsystem. All sorts of things you can imbue artifacts with. This would also let the DM create any sort of custom artifact they want for their campaign. I know I love playing with charts and tables like this to see what I can come up with. And then full explanation of what all the powers do. There's some example artifacts in here. And they're a whole lot more interesting than just plain magic items. And that's the end of the Master DM's book. So, going through the Master set, and I apologize for not being as focused as I usually am in this particular video, but again, there's been a lot going on. So, I end up coming out of my reread of these books in about the same way as I came into it. I think that the sweet spot in BECMI is the climb to the top of the expert set. Once you move into the companion set, the game shifts and you have to really change the focus of your adventures to adapt to the power level of the characters. And what becomes difficult is if the party decides they all want to put down stakes and they all want to start carving out their own slice of the campaign world, then they become less a party and more a group of former compatriots, each really looking to their own concerns. You have to come up with some very interesting stories to bring those sorts of people back together. Now, you could get lucky and your players decide to just keep adventuring, become a famous adventuring troupe, continue to work for other kings or other rulers, challenge the immortals themselves, that sort of thing. But I recall, upon reaching the levels in which you can start to become a ruler in your own right, a lot of players find that the win condition of D&D, at least the ones I've played with. I know I've done that sort of thing with a couple of characters myself. I tend to play clerics a lot. And once my cleric can establish a stronghold and start to spread the faith out from there, that's kind of right in line with what a cleric should do. At that point, you've got lower level clerics working for you that you can send out to clean out dungeons or deal with those goblins raiding the trade routes. So as a DM, you have to come up with new and interesting ways to draw your characters back into the adventures. It's very different, but also kind of rewarding if you can make it work. I do feel for the fighters, and that's one reason if I ever got to these levels again, I would make sure to give the weapon mastery rules another swing. Because the fighter needs to be able to increase in power in the same way the spellcasters do, or at least feel like they are. I was reading over the spell descriptions in this and in the companion set, and remembering how truly frightening spellcasters were in this version of D&D. Now, I've played my fair share of 5e, and I'm not going to complain about 5e. I actually rather enjoy it. But I feel like magic has been made a lot more mundane, and in some ways nerfed in 5e. I feel like the spell saves are a lot easier to make in 5e than they were in BECMI D&D, where most creatures save as a fighter of a given level, and fighters until they're very high level are pretty weak against spells. So I feel like the magic in BECMI, especially at the higher levels, is still, by the immortals, world-shaking magic. And that's kind of how it ought to be. But moving into levels that high should be very rare. One of the reasons I tend not to go into the higher levels myself is because I very much remember reading the original Dragonlance Adventures hardcover and seeing that once you approach level 18, the gods of Krynn basically ask you to go somewhere else because you're becoming far too powerful for the world of Krynn. I think because halflings top out at 8, elves at 10, and dwarves at 12, humans topping out at 14 is not a bad deal. And I would almost like to look into taking the immortality rules and scaling them backward, perhaps into the 20s, maybe into the high teens, and seeing what would happen if you compressed BECMI down into a smaller set of levels and tried to take a party all the way through to ascending to immortality. I think it could be a lot of fun. If I could find the time and put together my dream team of players, I might give it a shot myself. Thanks for listening to me drone on about this one. I, again, realize this was not my best overview, but I'm a little torn on the master set. It's got some cool stuff. It's got some stuff I don't feel like I would use, like levels 26 through 36. But we're going to continue 2 episodes from now and delve into the Immortal set. And that is a complete game changer, very literally. In the meantime, due to my custom of doing something that's not D&D in the weeks between doing something that is, next week, we're going to take a look at TSR's Star Frontiers role-playing game, an old favorite of mine. Until then, this has been the Old Dragoon. And remember, character is what you are in the dark. Good night, everybody.